Hi, and welcome to my channel. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. It's great to have you back. If you're a first-time viewer, please stick around and see what I have to offer. So, what are we talking about today? Today is a bit of an oddity. Chopper Read. Chopper from the inside. Now, this is a true crime book, okay? And you may have heard of Chopper Read because he became a kind of like minor celebrity in sort of the true crime world about, I don't know, about 15 years ago, probably. He was an Australian criminal, so he always had a certain amount of notoriety in Australia. He appeared on various news programs where he was interviewed because of his bizarre lifestyle. You know, he'd spent most of his life in prison, and he was a very, very colourful character. And he kind of reached worldwide recognition, if you want to call it that, with the titular film Chopper. He was the titular chopper of the title, in which Eric Bana, the famous Australian actor, played Chopper Read. And this was a really, really, really successful movie. You may well have seen the movie. And so this is the book that started it all. Okay, this is the book that started all of the furore around furore's maybe the one word. This is what basically shot Chopper Read to stardom. Basically, what happened is he was in prison. And he had managed to wrangle a book deal. So what he did was he would write letters. Essentially, he would write the book. And under the guise of it being a letter to somebody on the outside. So he essentially wrote his book looked like this, chapter by chapter. And then he would post the chapters out. And then that's how the book was essentially published. So that's why it's called Chopper from the Inside, because it's what he wrote while he was locked up. Okay, and this is the book that started it all. Since then, there's been a hit film. They made a hit film of Chopper Read's life called, imaginatively enough, Chopper, starring Eric Bana. You could well have seen the movie or heard of the movie. It's a very, very famous movie. It was very, very successful, and it really put Chopper Read on the map. And this was Chopper Read's first, we could say, memoir, but it was followed by a long succession of other books of increasingly dubious veracity. Now, Chopper Read himself was one of these people who never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And a lot of his claims, right from the beginning, right from this book here, right through to his later books, a lot of his claims have been questioned, to say the least. He's one of these people who, people say that he got a lot of his stories from other people. He hasn't done half of the things that he said he did, because he does make some very, 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 very kind of, bold claims about his own criminal life. So a bit of background on Chopper Read. So Chopper Read was essentially a delinquent thug. He came from a very, very broken home. His father was ex-military. He'd served in the Australian military, I believe, during the Second World War. And his father was a horrible man. His father was essentially, you get the impression his father was mental. His father was a bigot. He was homophobic. He was racist, and he passed these traits on to his son. Chopper Read was the same. Okay, so Chopper Read had Mark Brandon Read had a very, very rocky childhood, and he grew up. He developed into basically a violent thug, and that's pretty much all he ever was throughout his lifetime. He became what in Australian parlance is known as a standover man. So that means that he and his cohorts would kidnap a drug dealer, and they would demand to know where the drug dealer's cash was. And if the drug dealer wasn't suitably forthcoming, they would subject the individual to torture. So Chopper Read goes into a bit of detail here about, how he would, hold a blowtorch to someone's feet, or they would cut someone's toes off with bolt cutters. I don't know if this is true or not, but it's a horrific story. Which and then this book is also it's about his life before prison, his life in prison, and he was actually released, and he went on to kind of like carve out a kind of career for himself on the speaking circuit, talking in pubs, giving talks in pubs. One of his strong points was that he was a good talker, and he did have like a sense of humour. You know, he was able to kind of, you know, interact with people. He was a very kind of like larger than life character. And, you know, this stood him in good stead, you know, when he was released, because he was able to, you know, parlay his experience as a violent criminal and a thug into, you know, something kind of resembling a career, we could say. So this is an unusual book. I mean, it's unusual because of the way it was written, because of the context around it and the content, but it's also unusual in the sense that this is the only book that's on my channel so far that I do not recommend you read. I'm talking to you about it today just because I find it a bit of a curiosity, really. It's interesting because this book started off, this is what started off, you know, a whole kind of mini cultural phenomena in the true crime world, which was Mark Brandon Reed, Chopper. This, if you do decide to read this book, and it is widely available. I mean, I sent off for this copy because I was curious. I bought this directly from Australia before the Chopper books were widely available in England, for example. But you know, the Chopper Reads books are widely available. Beware if you are curious and you do want to read this or any of his books. Beware that it contains racist language, it contains racist imagery and homophobic language as well. Chopper Read was a bigot, he was a racist, he was a homophobe, and I don't condone this at all, and I'm not defending it in any way. So please don't think that by talking about this book, I'm condoning these attitudes. I'm not. But you know, he wasn't somebody to look up to or to admire or anything like this. But he was kind of a cultural curiosity. I mean, Hollywood made a blockbuster film. You know, they made a big budget film about him, starring Eric Bana, which did very, very well. You know, I was curious. You might say, well, why was I curious? I mean, I think sometimes, particularly when you're younger, you can be kind of curious about people like this because they live a life so far removed from that of the rest of us. But when you get right down to it, what's interesting is when you read between the lines and everything, you realize that, you know, what a kind of grimy, unpleasant, sordid existence Chopper Read led, and people like him. I mentioned before that he never let the truth get in the way of a good story. I mean, he makes some claims in this book, which he kind of goes back on a bit in later life. The book starts off with a story about him supposedly being kidnapped by someone with a grudge and being driven somewhere out in the countryside and being forced to dig his own grave, and then him essentially fighting his way out of it. This is almost certainly an utterly fictional story. The reason I'm mentioning it is because Chopper Read, you know, a lot of what he did write about himself, you know, has been called into question. You know, he was a great storyteller and a bit of a character, but also a massive bullshit artist for sure. So I'm just talking about this because, you know, I thought, okay, it might be interesting to present this. It's something a bit different. If you do want to check it out, if you do decide to check out Chopper Read and his adventures, you can also find his books are readily available now, and there are interviews with him on YouTube and this kind of thing. If you are interested in that kind of thing, if you just want to see something a bit different, but I do want to emphasize that, you know, I'm not recommending Chopper Read's content, and I'm not recommending this book. As I say, it's just a bit of a curiosity. Well, okay, that's all there is for today. So I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you did so, please leave a like and subscribe. Tune into my next video, okay, for the exciting opportunity to win $28 billion US. That's right, you heard me. Next video, there will be the chance for you, the viewer, to win $28 billion US. Until then, au revoir.